There are nights when faith does not feel like fire. It feels like silence. It feels like staring at the ceiling in the dark, replaying conversations, wondering if heaven heard you the first time. It feels like praying the same prayer for the 100th time and feeling nothing change. No lightning, no breakthrough, no sudden peace flooding your chest. Just you and the quiet. What if I told you that some of the strongest faith in your life will not feel strong at all? It was late. The kind of late where the world slows down and your thoughts get louder. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, hands clasped. Not dramatically, not spiritually polished. Just tired. The room was dim, lit only by the soft yellow of a bedside lamp. The air felt heavy, not evil, just heavy, like something unresolved was sitting in the room with me. I had done everything I knew to do. I had prayed, I had fasted, I had spoken declarations, I had quoted promises. I had told myself to stand in faith, but that night standing felt more like swaying. There's a version of faith we are taught to expect. The powerful version. The loud version. The version where you feel bold and unshakable and filled with certainty. The kind that makes you want to testify immediately. But that's not always the version you get. Sometimes faith feels like continuing to show up when you are secretly exhausted. Sometimes faith feels like whispering, "I still trust you," when your voice is shaking. Sometimes faith feels like doing the right thing without applause, without validation, without visible results. And that night, I did not feel powerful. I felt small. I felt human. I felt the tension between what I believed and what I was experiencing. And that is where something deeper began. Because there was a moment, quiet, almost unnoticeable, when a memory rose in my spirit. Not like a preacher quoting a verse at me. Not like a loud announcement. It came like a scene, like stepping into an old story. I could see a father walking toward a teacher, desperate. His son had been suffering. No one had been able to fix it. The disciples had tried and failed. The crowd was watching. The pressure was thick. And when the teacher asked if he believed, the father did not respond with polished faith. He said something painfully honest. He admitted he believed. And in the same breath, he admitted he struggled. It wasn't a perfect confession. It wasn't bold. It was messy and real and exposed. And yet that honesty did not repel power. It drew it. In that dimly lit room, I realized something that shifted me. Faith is not the absence of doubt. Faith is choosing to bring your doubt to God instead of away from Him. The Father did not pretend. He did not perform. He did not fake certainty to look spiritual in front of the crowd. He stood there with trembling faith and said, in essence, "This is all I have. Help me." And heaven responded. Not because his faith was loud, but because it was present. You see, we think faith has to feel like adrenaline, like goosebumps, like certainty running through your veins. But sometimes faith is simply refusing to leave, refusing to walk away from God when the answer delays, refusing to harden your heart when you feel disappointed, refusing to numb yourself when the outcome doesn't look the way you expected. That night, sitting there, I realized my exhaustion was not proof that I lacked faith. It was proof that I had been carrying something heavy for a long time, and the fact that I was still talking to God about it meant something. You might be there right now. You might be praying for restoration that hasn't shown up yet. You might be believing for healing that still feels far away. You might be asking for clarity while everything around you feels confusing. And because you don't feel bold, because you don't feel powerful, you think something is wrong with your faith. But what if nothing is wrong? What if your quiet endurance is more powerful than emotional intensity? There is a kind of strength that looks dramatic. And then there is a kind of strength that looks like consistency. Waking up again, praying again, trusting again, loving again, even after disappointment, even after silence, even after delay. That father in the crowd did not look powerful. He looked desperate, but desperation that moves toward Jesus is not weakness. It is courage. And that night, I stopped trying to feel powerful. I just decided to stay. I stayed in the conversation. I stayed in the prayer. I stayed in the relationship. And something subtle shifted inside me. Not fireworks, not euphoria, just a quiet alignment, like my spirit exhaled and said, "You don't have to perform faith. You just have to keep bringing your heart." There is an inner strength that is born in hidden places. It does not announce itself. It forms slowly, like roots growing beneath soil. No one applauds roots. But roots are what hold trees upright when storms come. When you keep trusting in the dark, roots are forming. When you keep obeying without applause, roots are forming. When you keep believing even while you're confused, roots are forming. And roots do not feel powerful while they are growing. They feel underground. You may not feel powerful right now, but you are deeper than you were before. That night, I realized something else. Faith is not measured by how strongly you feel. It is measured by where you turn when you don't feel strong. Do you turn inward and isolate? Do you turn outward and blame? Or do you turn upward, even if your prayer is only a whisper? Because sometimes the most anointed prayer you will ever pray is not eloquent. It is honest. "God, I'm tired. God, I don't understand. God, I still trust you. But help me." There is something sacred about bringing God your unfiltered heart. We think we have to impress Him. We think we have to sound spiritual. We think we have to convince Him. But the Father in that crowd teaches us something eternal. Honesty invites intervention. I don't know what you're facing tonight, but I know this. If you are still here, still listening, still leaning toward God in any way, your faith is alive. It may not be loud, but it is alive. And living faith, even trembling faith, can move mountains over time. You don't have to feel powerful to be powerful. Sometimes power looks like staying soft when you could become bitter. Sometimes power looks like continuing to love when you are hurt. Sometimes power looks like patience when everything in you wants to force the outcome. There is a strength forming in you that does not depend on emotion, and that strength is sustainable. The world celebrates dramatic breakthroughs, but heaven celebrates endurance, because endurance means relationship. Endurance means you didn't walk away. Endurance means something inside you chose covenant over convenience. That night did not end with everything changing externally. The situation I was praying about did not instantly resolve, but I changed. I stopped measuring my faith by feeling. I started measuring it by faithfulness, by presence, by persistence. And I want to tell you something gently but clearly. Faith doesn't always feel powerful, but it is powerful anyway. In the next part, we're going deeper into what happens when heaven feels silent, and why silence does not mean absence. Because sometimes the most powerful moves of God are happening in ways you cannot see yet. Stay with me. There is a particular kind of silence that feels personal, not just quiet, but targeted, as if heaven heard you and chose not to respond. You pray and nothing shifts. You worship and nothing breaks. You wait and nothing moves. And slowly, a thought begins to whisper, maybe God is distant. Maybe He stepped back. Maybe I missed something. That is where faith becomes heavy. Not dramatic, not fiery, heavy. I remember walking through a season like that. Days blended into each other. I would wake up early, sit with my Bible open, journal ready, worship playing softly in the background. The routine was there, the discipline was there, but the feeling gone. No rush of peace, no sudden clarity, no emotional confirmation, just obedience. And obedience without emotion feels dry. I kept wondering if I had offended God without realizing it, if I had somehow disqualified myself from breakthrough, if the silence meant disapproval, but then something shifted in my understanding. Silence is not the same as absence. Think about a teacher during an exam. The room is quiet. The teacher is not talking, but the teacher is present, watching, observing, allowing the process to unfold. Silence does not mean the teacher left the room, and silence does not mean God left yours. There was another scene that came alive to me, not as a sermon, but as a moment. A boat, dark water, wind rising, disciples straining at the oars, waves climbing higher, fear building. And where was Jesus? Not panicking, not shouting, sleeping. That image used to confuse me. How could he sleep in a storm? Until I realized something. His rest was not ignorance of the storm. It was authority over it. The storm did not disturb him because it was not bigger than him. But to the disciples, it felt like death was seconds away. And isn't that how it feels sometimes? You're rowing. You're straining. You're trying to hold everything together. And it feels like God is asleep. You cry out, "Don't you care?" That question is not new. It echoes across centuries. And yet when Jesus stood up in that boat, he did not rebuke the storm first. He addressed the fear, because sometimes the real storm is not around you, it's inside you. When faith doesn't feel powerful, it is often because fear is loud. Fear of delay, fear of loss, fear of embarrassment, fear that you misheard God. And when fear is loud, faith feels small. But small does not mean ineffective. A seed is small. Whisper is small. A decision is small. Yet seeds become forests. Whispers become movements. Decisions change destinies. There is something deeply powerful about choosing to trust when you do not feel reassured. That is mature faith. Childlike faith trusts because it sees. Mature faith trusts even when it doesn't. And I believe some of you listening are not weak. You are maturing. It does not feel glamorous. It feels stretching. It feels uncomfortable. It feels like God is pulling you beyond emotional dependency into relational depth. When you first fall in love with God, everything feels electric. Every verse feels personal. Every worship song makes you cry. Every prayer feels immediate. But then there comes a season where the feelings fade. And many people interpret that as loss. But what if it is invitation? What if God is inviting you beyond the surface, beyond emotional highs, into covenant is not built on constant excitement. It is built on commitment. Marriage is not powerful because butterflies last forever. It is powerful because commitment remains when butterflies fade, and your relationship with God is deeper than moments of inspiration. It is covenant. When the feelings quiet down, it is not rejection. It is depth. I remember one evening walking outside just to clear my head. The sky was turning from blue to deep indigo. The air felt cool. There was a stillness in the neighborhood. No cars passing, no voices nearby. And I asked out loud, "Are you still here?" Not accusing, just honest. And there was no audible voice, no dramatic sign. Just a gentle awareness that I was breathing, that my heart was beating, that I was still being sustained. And something in me understood. The same God who sustained your breath is not absent from your battle. Sometimes his presence is not felt. It is foundational. You are standing on it without realizing it. You woke up this morning. You are still standing. You have not collapsed under the pressure. That is not accidental. There are battles you survived that should have broken you. There are disappointments that should have hardened you. There are delays that should have stolen your hope. And yet, here you are. That is quiet grace. We often want dramatic miracles. But sustaining grace is a miracle too. When faith doesn't feel powerful, you must learn to recognize quiet evidence. The fact that you did not quit. The fact that you still care. The fact that you still desire God even when you feel distant. Desire itself is evidence of connection. You would not long for him if he had left. You would not ache for breakthrough if something inside you had died. The ache is proof that faith is still alive. And here is something else the storm story teaches us. Jesus eventually stood up. He spoke, and the storm responded. The timing did not match the disciples' panic, but it matched divine purpose. Delay does not mean denial. Silence does not mean indifference. It may mean formation, because storms reveal what calm seasons hide. In calm water, everyone looks confident. In storms, your inner foundation is exposed. And that exposure is not to shame you, it is to strengthen you. There are parts of your faith that cannot grow in comfort. They grow in tension. They grow in waiting. They grow when you choose trust without emotional reward. You may not feel powerful right now, but you are being anchored. Anchors are not glamorous. They are heavy, hidden, uncelebrated. But when storms rise, anchors matter more than sails. Emotion is a sail, commitment is an anchor, and God is building anchors in you. One day you will look back at this season and realize it did more for you than the seasons where everything felt easy. Because it taught you to stay when staying was hard. It taught you to pray when prayer felt repetitive. It taught you to believe without applause. That is authority is not loud. It is stable. The most dangerous believer in the kingdom is not the loudest one. It is the one who cannot be moved by feelings. The one who has learned that God's character does not shift with circumstances. The one who knows that even when heaven feels silent, heaven is steady. So if you are in a silent season, do not interpret it as abandonment. Interpret it as deep work. Roots are growing again. Your faith is stretching beyond sensation. And in the next part, we are going into the turning point, where prayer shifts from desperate striving into powerful alignment. Because there comes a moment when you stop asking God to prove himself, and you begin to declare who he has always been. Stay with me. There comes a moment in every quiet season where something inside you either hardens or aligns. You can stay in the place of, why hasn't this changed? Or you can shift into, who are you in this? And that shift changes everything. I remember the exact night it happened for me. Nothing externally had improved. The situation was still unresolved. The prayer was still unanswered in the way I wanted. The timeline had not sped up, but something in me was tired of striving, tired of trying to squeeze emotion out of heaven, tired of measuring God by manifestation, tired of checking for signs every 5 minutes. So instead of asking for another confirmation, I did something different. I sat still. No music, no journaling, no rehearsed declarations, just stillness. And in that stillness, I stopped asking God to prove he was faithful. I started remembering that he already had. I remembered doors that opened when I had no connections, provision that showed up at the last minute, protection I didn't even realize I needed at the time, strength that carried me through seasons that should have broken me. And suddenly, prayer shifted. It was no longer, God, please show up. It became, God, you have always shown up. There is a difference between begging and aligning. Begging focuses on lack. Alignment focuses on truth. And truth is steady. There was a moment in Scripture, not loud, not dramatic, when a young shepherd stood before a giant. Everyone else saw size. He saw history. He remembered the lion. He remembered the bear. He remembered what God had already done in private. So when he stepped into public battle, his confidence wasn't emotion. It was memory. Authority grows from memory. When faith doesn't feel powerful, go back and remember. Not just the big miracles. Remember the small rescues. The times you almost gave up, but didn't. The times help came unexpectedly. The times clarity arrived at the perfect second. You are not starting from scratch. You are standing on evidence. That night, I began to speak differently. Not louder, clearer. God, you are consistent. God, you are not intimidated by delay. God, you are forming me in this. Declarations are not about convincing God. They are about stabilizing your own soul. Your soul forgets. Your spirit knows. Declarations bring them back into agreement. And something powerful happens when your internal atmosphere shifts. The problem may still exist, but panic leaves. Desperation quiets. Clarity settles. You stop striving for breakthrough, and you start standing in identity. Because here is the deeper truth. Faith doesn't always feel powerful, because faith was never meant to be fueled by feelings. It was meant to be rooted in identity. Who are you when the answer delays? Are you abandoned? Or are you becoming? Are you rejected? Or are you being refined? Are you forgotten? Or are you being prepared? Your interpretation determines your posture, and posture determines your peace. When I shifted from, why is this happening, to, what is this forming, something in me matured. I stopped needing constant reassurance. I started walking with quiet certainty, and that quiet certainty is stronger than hype. There are believers who are loud but unstable, and there are believers who are calm but unshakable. God is not building noise in you, He is building weight. Weight carries authority. Weight carries presence. Weight carries influence that does not crumble under pressure. And maybe that is what this season is really about. Not just getting the answer you want, but becoming the person who can carry it. Because sometimes the blessing you are praying for requires a version of you that does not panic under silence. A version of you that does not crumble under delay. A version of you that trusts God's character more than your timeline. You are not being denied. You are being developed. And development rarely feels powerful. It feels stretching. But stretching creates capacity. And capacity prepares you for more. There is something I need you to hear clearly. If you are still trusting God in a season that makes no emotional sense, you are stronger than you think. If you are still showing up when nothing dramatic is happening, you are deeper than you realize. If you are still praying even when you feel dry, your roots are alive. Now, I want to shift us into something intentional, not striving, not emotional hype, alignment. Wherever you are right now, take a breath, not to perform, just to center. God, we come without performance. We come without pretending. Some of us feel strong. Some of us feel tired. Some of us feel steady. Some of us feel confused. But we are here, and that matters. You are not intimidated by our honesty. You are not threatened by our questions. You are not distant in our delay. You are forming strength that does not depend on emotion. So we declare, even when I do not feel powerful, I am anchored. Even when I do not see movement, God is working. Even when heaven feels silent, it is not absent. Even when answers delay, development is happening. I will not measure God by my mood. I will measure Him by His character. I will not interpret silence as rejection. I will interpret it as formation. I am not abandoned. I am being built. I am not forgotten. I am being prepared. I am not weak because I feel weary. I am growing roots, and roots hold. God, align our perspective, calm our internal storms. Teach us to trust without emotional proof. Build in us a faith that is steady, not flashy. And when breakthrough comes, and it will, we will carry it with humility, because we know who formed us in the waiting. Now, here is the soft truth I want to leave you with. One day, you will look back at this quiet season and realize it was the most powerful one. Not because everything changed overnight, but because you did. Faith doesn't always feel powerful, but it is shaping you into someone who is. And maybe the real question is not, why doesn't this feel powerful? Maybe the real question is, what kind of strength is being built in you right now that you cannot yet see? Stay aware, stay anchored, stay present. Because the version of you emerging from this season will not be easily shaken.